Centre of centuries of Australian culture, and how it almost disappeared in just a decade. This is the Stolen Generation.
Seems like just yesterday when Australia witnessed what became known as the Apology from Kevin Rudd on the 13th of February 2008, then in his first of two stints as Australian Prime Minister.
To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry.
Several thousands watched on as an understandably nervous Rudd delivered a speech that would send shockwaves amongst the ATSI community across the nation. The Apology, as it soon became known, as was addressed by Rudd representing the government. The speech of Kevin Rudd was the result of years of inquiry by the government into many members of Indigenous Australians who had been brutally removed from their communities, and how they may repair the relationship between the two collectives. Many politicians and people in power, such as John Howard, were reluctant in apologising to the Indigenous community. However, the release of the Bringing Them Home report from the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission released eye-opening statistics that exposed the government, eventually apologising 11 years later.
This Stolen Generation were a large portion of ATSI members in Northern Australia who were separated from fellow tribal, communal and family members against their own will, as a result of radical government policies. Although the beginning of the separation of the ATSI members dates centuries ago from the early days of British colonisation in Australia, it is widely regarded that the name of the Stolen Generation stems from the 1900s to the 1970s segregation. Children were removed based on race to assimilate those with mixed ancestry into the non-Indigenous community.
The first policy regarding the Stolen Generation came into place in 1869, where the Aborigines Protection Act established a protection board in Victoria. This allowed governors to forcibly remove Indigenous children from their family into industrial schools. It was this act that started a domino effect, and just a year later, the Aboriginal Protection and Restriction Act allowed the children to be held in dormitories. This act was the main cause of trauma for the young children, which stayed in place until 1965. In the year 1901, Australia was federated, not taking Aboriginal members into consideration of the census, not allowing Aboriginals to have a say into laws, therefore having full political control over the ATSI community. However, it was the Aborigines Protection Amending Act in 1915 that sparked the beginning of the Stolen Generation. This act gave power to the government to separate Indigenous children from their families without any need for a court hearing.
Adam Goodes was an accomplished athlete, but most importantly, a role model for young Indigenous Australians amidst tough times. We bring Adam Goodes in today to discuss the importance of the apology. Through evidence of the Healing Foundation, which has since assisted more than 45,000 Indigenous people through healing processes, and the Closing the Gap report from Prime Minister Turnbull that has significantly increased Indigenous people that have healthcare and has assisted in bringing quality education for the next generation. I have no other explanation that the apology brought many tears amongst the ATSI community in the hopes for a reconciled future. It brought us all together. And through the National Reparations Framework with compensation, the ATSI members felt their pain was acknowledged.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam, for your time today. I completely agree that the apology has had a great impact on bringing reconciliation between two communities through the Closing the Gap report and Bringing Them Home report. That's also all we have time for in our 60 Minutes documentary tonight. Thank you for watching.